How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today's video is on potential modern tanks coming in to World of Tanks console. We've had loads of different hints and kind of things coming into the game that have guided us towards believing that there might be modern tanks entering into World of Tanks console. We're going to go over some ideas, some reasons why I think this, and also then go over what possible implementation of modern tanks we're going to see in World of Tanks console, featuring a couple of theories and kind of suggestions that I believe would work. Obviously, that might be different for different World of Tanks game modes. I don't know if, PC are going to have this or not, but I expect that's where we're headed in terms of extra things coming into the game. I don't know if they're going to continue development on the current tech tree and the current kind of theme of the World War II-esque tanks, or whether we're now going to be moving on to just developing the modern kind of style tanks. Now, first things first is this current screen that we have. When you come onto the game, you get this kind of loading screen. It usually has some areas here where it tells you what ops are currently on in that week, and then we have a little bit of overlays and stuff like that. But one thing you should see in the background, right at the back, is this red poster at the very back, which shows you that there is a kind of an M1 Abrams looking tank at the back. Now, we don't know that this is exactly the M1 Abrams, but considering we've been constantly bombarded with Abrams related content, like we've got the Abrams Commander, we've had a few different Abrams tanks in the game in terms of the layout of the design, which you can see on screen right now, of this hull, which looks like a very modern-esque HUD feature. Now, this was key on World of Tanks console when the update 6.0 first went live, and everyone was complaining. To me personally, I'm not bothered about what it looks like as long as I can read it. My main issue with when they first implemented it was the readability of the different icons and not knowing actually which one did which. They were far too small and it just didn't work, in my opinion. So I'm glad that got changed, but it still features this modern looking tank. None of the current tanks in game look anything like this, and I'm pretty sure that this is a way in which they're trying to develop into the modern market of tanks, as well as keeping the old tanks that we currently have. Now, additionally, we have this feature right here with the M1 Abrams on the top secret redacted tech tree. So if you go on your game in either PS4 or Xbox One World of Tanks, then you can see this every single time when you hop on. You can see that there is this top secret redacted tech tree. Now, what does this mean? Potentially what it's going to be is either it will be contracts where you can pick up modern tanks, or they could potentially go in a way where there's a separate matchmaker for people who play the modern tanks. Do I think that there's going to be loads and loads when it first gets released, if that's the route that they're going to take? Probably not. I'm looking at maybe 10 vehicles maximum, I reckon, when they first implement this modern game mode. I reckon it will be one tier. They won't be mix of match of tiers where you've got a massive tech tree. I feel like they'll probably go in the direction of maybe 20 tanks at most, where you've got plenty of different ones. Maybe they'll have a tier 1 and a tier 2 modern tanks. So it'll be similar to the tech tree now in terms of the way it's laid out. It's just that it would potentially be having a tier 1 and a tier 2. The tier 1 one, everyone can pick up one. It might have one tank leading on to 3. Or it could be like a one tank leading onto 1, etc. But I feel like for every nation there might only be one or two branches that come off, and potentially about 3 or 4 maximum tanks that are in that nation. I don't think that they're going to have very many, as modern tanks don't tend to be that diverse, and we'll have a look at some ones that might come into the game and current modern tanks that are actually out in service across the world. We'll talk a little bit about them and what they feature, and then in just a second, but we'll carry on with our theories here as to how it will work. I think when you look back and you realise that they took out tier 1 and tier 2 of the current tech tree, I think maybe what they're trying to do is get rid of people who are just playing in those tier 1 and tier 2 areas to boost the matchmaking potential of the other tiers, which would help with when they implement these modern tanks potentially. it would mean that there's a bigger player base to be able to feature having extra tiers where it takes some people away from the actual matchmaker right now, reduce the loading times and stuff like that, and then it will just be better for everyone. Whether I think that this is exactly what's going to happen, I'm not entirely sure, but I think that this is the area which Wargaming are developing at the moment, trying to branch into that modern tank, armoured warfare style era of tanks. I don't think it will be anything. It will just be the same game that we play now. You'll have modern tanks as well. So, for those of you that are going to complain, modern tanks, blah, 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 but you don't have to play them. It will probably be a separate game mode, like, the Tank Commander. If you don't want to play it, go on the normal mode. It's not going to bug you or anything. And if you do want to play it, then go ahead, because it will just be the exact same game I'm expecting as the current game. It's just that you are literally playing in a tank that's modern. That's all I think is going to happen. Now, in this, you can also see posters yet again of the M1 Abrams down in the bottom left. I think it actually says the M1 Abrams as well on this poster. You can kind of make out in the bottom that it says Abrams right here, I believe, and then it might be a picture of the of actual Abram. But yeah, so I'm thinking that these are definitely the way that the Wargaming are going to go with in the future. We're definitely going to probably see these, whether it is just an April Fool's like they had on the Wargaming PC version some years ago. They released like a statement that they're bringing out modern tanks, etc. But whether we'll see that as an April Fool's on April 1st, I don't know. I'm really hoping it isn't like that, because they've dragged it on for far too long. They started the joke way too far behind. And it seems like they've actually gone to a lot of effort for that. So I'm really hoping that that's not the case, and that's not just all a joke. But moving on to the actual tanks we might be able to see in-game as part of this modern tanks, we're not going to go over every single possibility, but we'll have a look at some potential ones that we can have a look at. Now, the first one is obviously the M1 Abrams. This was introduced in 1980 and currently serves around the world in various different countries and stuff like that. It's really, really quite known that it is the best tank in the world in terms of the current fleet of tanks, or whatever you want to call them. It is basically the best in the world. It's mad. It's kind of like a main battle tank, so you've got obviously different variants of tanks, but this one is the main battle tank, and it's the one that's going to be facing off against loads of other nations' tanks, etc. if anyone was to go to war. Now, what's good about this tank? It has reactive armor, which means its armor is just way, 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 way stronger than just having flat armor. It also means that it's going to absorb a lot more impact, so penetration, such as a Jaeger heat round would actually get absorbed, even though the armor is thinner necessarily than another tank. But it would actually still bounce, because it's just that well angled, and it's just optimized even further than some of the old tanks that you might see in the current game. Now, moving on, we have a French tank, the Clerk. This is currently still in use as well. Came into service in 1993, and it is one of those kind of underwhelming in terms of if you compare it to the M1 Abrams, but then a lot of them are. This thing is kind of flexible. You can use it for various different things. From what I've read, I don't know a whole lot about these modern tanks, but just going off what I've briefly read, this is a tank that could potentially be in the game. I don't know whether they'll go with like the previous version, so this being the tier 2 variant, and then having a previous one that led to the development of this. Then for Britain, we have the Challenger 2. This is quite a popular one as well. Everyone tends to know the Challenger tank. So yeah, this is the second variant, so developed upon the first one. It costs about £4 million to make one, and there's 447 that have been built in total. We're looking at a tank that would probably play very similar to the Chieftain in terms of how you'd actually see it in game. So yeah, it would be quite fun to give this a go. I think that this would be the tank that I'd actually get, but that is probably because I'm slightly biased and British. So yeah, hopefully we see that tank if these modern tanks come in. And then we've got the German line, potentially the Leopard 2. This is a development upon, obviously, the Leopard 1 that is currently in the game. And this is the German version. It's quite well known that it is a really good tank. It's really speedy, and it takes that armor where, you know, it's using effective armor rather than that heavily chunked armor that, you know, the E100, the Maus and stuff in previous pass featured. And yeah, hopefully it will actually be good if it comes into the game. This one will be the fast mobile one, I guess, out of them all. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see these modern tanks. Whether I think that I'll play the game mode that much, probably not too much as well, because I feel like there's only so many variations of the same ones you can have. A lot of the tanks, like if we have a look at the M1 Abrams, they actually have loads of different designations, so they've got upgraded versions. I don't know if Wargaming would branch into potentially making, instead of having multiple tanks, the tiers, whether they'd have like a larger gun version of the Abrams, or whether they'd have like an artillery version, you know what I mean? It like just branching into the M1A2 or something like that, where they've got different variants of the same tank. And then finally we've got the Russian one. This is the last one in this video. That we're not going to go into every single modern tank because there's tons and tons, and some of them are just absolute rubbish, well, that probably would never make it into the game. And this is kind of just picking out a couple from each nation, or at least one from the big nations in World of Tanks. So this is the T90. This is a current battle tank used in Russia. They've currently got a new one, the T90M. This is the most recent one, and I think it came into service in 2020. So the T90M or the T90MS is another main battle tank, very similar to everyone else. And yeah, it's got this reactive armor as well, I believe. As you can see, I think that what every nation is now doing is just trying to maximize and optimize everyone's composite armor, so, you know, making it harder for the penetration rounds to go through, rather than just making a massive gun like the FV 4005 or the Death Star. Rather than doing that, they're just actually focusing on their own armor, and, you know, using the current technological methods to be able to increase the penetration values rather than just make the gun bigger, which seems like a thing that would be standard. But obviously if you optimize some of the smaller ones, you can fire faster, you can do all of that sort of thing. And yeah, I think that this is the likely tanks that we would probably see if we actually got the game mode. Not 100%, obviously it's all theories, and it does rely upon Wargaming not just absolutely having a laugh and being like, yeah, we're not actually implementing any of this, it was all just a joke. Hopefully it isn't that, because it would actually be an actual joke of a move if they did that. But, you know, we'll have to wait and see. I don't know too much. I'd really like to hear your opinions as to what you think about this. Have a look at some of the stuff that they've mentioned, and then, you know, give your own opinion. What do you think we'll see? How do you reckon they'll implement this into the current matchmaker without reducing the amount of players too much to negatively impact both players? You know, if you're having to wait 5 minutes for a game, obviously no one's going to want to do that. They're not going to play it. They're just going to go back to the normal one. But then if too many people play the new one, it's going to leave the old matchmaker in a bit of a state. And I think that that's probably why they try to remove the tier 1 and 2 and limit down the amount of people that are going to be playing those low tiers on the first one, to help increase the queue times potentially if they bring this in, which I believe they probably will. I don't reckon they'll mix the tiers, so they won't have tier 10 playing against the tier 11 tank that is the modern ones. I think it's just going to be, you know, a whole new, like, essentially a whole new game just shoved off to the side for them to use instead. So, you know, you can pick which tank you want to go in and stuff like that. Really hoping the garage also gets sorted out, but that's something totally different. so we can actually see them in like from far away rather than right up close. Because I think aesthetically, it's always nice to see what you're playing in and stuff like that. Other than that, I hope you guys did enjoy the video. It was a theory-based one. There isn't too much in there in terms of content, but I would like to hear your thoughts on the different tanks that they could potentially bring in and how you reckon they'll actually bring them in. I hope you have a good rest of your day. I hope you have a good rest of your week, and I hope to see you in the next video. You can click them on screen right now to see any other content on my channel, and yeah, see ya.